to Project Porsche, everybody. In this episode, I finished the bulk of my fuel tank redo. Last episode, I glued this rubber boot together, and now it's time to install it. You can see I've got that plastic tube that I had cut those notches off of, and now I'm just sliding it into place, and boy, is it a lot easier. And it still blocks the crud that I think it's supposed to stop if anything does get up there. So you can see I was in the car just pulling that shaft back now from underneath the console, and then you have to get this thing to the end of that. Here's the bolt. You can see there's a hole in there for the safety wire. It's a little finicky to get this in, but it's not too hard. The point makes it a lot easier. 13. Here's an old shot of the wire before I took it out, and here it is. I straightened it out and cleaned it up. I think it would have worked good if I didn't use the boot, but I didn't want to tear the boot, so I decided to use this smaller diameter safety type wire. Wrapped it around a couple of different ways, put a little grease on there to help get the boot over, but then I ended up doing it one more time a different way. I actually wrapped it around the shaft, the skinnier shaft instead, and that worked good, and I was able to pull that boot all the way on there without ripping it. So that's on. I'm calling that good. Now I'm gonna torque these puppies down here and move on. I just stuck a couple of bolts in the flange, and I'm using a pry bar to pry against the transmission. 25 Newton meter, 18 foot-pounds.
Well, that is my torque wrench.
Time to torque, baby.
1, 2, 3. Torqued.
And then I just do the same thing on the other side.
2, 3. Torqued.
Try to get any loose stuff out of there. I'm just gonna clean the inside of the hub, the grease out, and then start putting these CV axles on. All right, so these are my freshly greased CV axles. It's like a gigantic shake weight. And here's my clean hardware. I've got the inside and the outsides. They're both different. Get some light on there. Upon further inspection, I decided I needed to get in here somehow and clean the crud out of these bolts. So I just grabbed some brake parts cleaner and used a little compressed air. Got the crud out of those heads. But I always lose this finger on my glove for some reason. Funny, huh? So it's just putting in the CV axles. The most difficult part is probably just lining up the holes, and then the tool I used wasn't the fanciest tool. I did kind of have to push the rubber boot out of the way. But for $7 for the set, I can't complain.
Are you going to watch the debate tonight?
Oh yeah, well I was going to turn it on out here.
Right.
Are you going to watch it?
From there.
I have to say I was looking forward to that debate. I was ready to see the Democrats face off against each other. And then after tightening them by hand, it was ready to torque them with the torque wrench. You can see I've got those brakes on there too. I have to cut this bad end off of here, and I'm just going to do it with the hacksaw. But I'm going to stick this hot glue gun glue inside the tube. So we're actually going back in time a little bit here. I end up having to replace this hose again later down the line, but I thought I would show you guys what I went through to try to make the old one work, and I just didn't have enough length. But I probably could have got away with it if the hose was just a little bit longer. Anyway, later on I have to replace this hose anyway. You'll get to see that. So this hose is actually heater hose that somebody decided to use as fuel hose. And I understand why, because they didn't sell any hose this large for fuel down at the auto parts store.
Wiggle it just a little bit. Wiggle it just a little bit.
But luckily, you can get it from Pelican Auto Parts for $20.
With the hose.
Croft and Slough. Make sure you got the Croft and Slough. And believe it or not, this is the only
This is a weird hose.
made pre-bent hose that I bought for this thing. It worked out pretty good. It's an actual Porsche part I got for $70. So before I could put in my fancy new hose, I had to put in my fancy new filter. M37 by 1.5. Hand tight. You're supposed to tighten it hand tight. One guy said he did 11 pounds. I did put a little bit of aluminum anti-seize on the threads of this. You can't see it because it's the same color. I went and got my trusty bag of, use this one for sure. I think I'm gonna use this one just because it's new, even though it seems to be the same length as this one. New clamps anyway, better than nothing. And the old clamps go in the bag. Clamp this. I hate these long hose clamps, so I'm gonna cut that end off of there. So I took that hose clamp and stuck it in the vise and cut the long end off with a hacksaw. And then I ran it over that file to knock down the sharp edges. So after that, I just went about putting the hose on, tightening up the hose clamps, making sure everything was snug. Hi, Sophia. Sophie just jumped on my legs. Hi. And then sticking back in these rubber plugs that cover up the windows. And then I went back out to the garage, get something out of the fridge. It smelled pretty strong like gas. Now I have to fix that return fuel hose that I was a little worried about that end up leaking. I ran up to the auto parts store and bought a couple of feet of 5/16 inch fuel injection hose and a box of clamps. So I picked up this Hizzos for the shizzos. I picked up this Hizzos for the Porsche. As I measured the outlet or inlet, I'm thinking I can just cut this, get this fitting off of here and cut this ring off. And there should be a barb that I could slip the new hose on and then clamp up here. Last night I had to pull this off because it was leaking out of here. Pull this off fast to get the cap on without trying to get gas all over everything. That crow's foot ratchet set that I have works really good for things like this. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a mark on here where I think the old hose ended. To the car, baby. With my mess of wrenches, like I took it off, I just put it back on. So now I just have to feed it through here, feed the hose through, then down and around to here. right here. Wow, that went way better than I thought it was gonna go. Nice. Put the bolts and nuts on there and this will be done. Heck yeah. Alright, that's the finished product. So there it is. It's nice to have the bulk of that project done, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out the show, guys. Hey, if you like what I'm doing, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.
This is pretty much the worst video ever made.
Yeah. Yep. Uh-huh.